I ended up finding so much awesome stuff at the Oklahoma Gaming Frenzy that I actually decided to make a whole video talking about everything that I ended up buying here. So there's some stuff you saw in other videos, but there's also a ton of other stuff that you haven't seen yet. So if you've seen those other videos, you want to stick around because there's more stuff here. But let's go ahead and head into the convention and see what we can find. I made my way to this first booth here where they had a bunch of games. Obviously, it's a game convention. I made my way through the NES, the Super Nintendo games, and then I ended up making my way to the N64 where I ended up grabbing Kobe Bryant and NBA courtside. Then I moved on to the Wii section here where I looked around. Then I made my way around the corner where they had a ton of drum sets for Rock Band and Guitar Hero, and then a ton of other cool stuff here on this table. But all I ended up getting from them was that one game. And then I went to the next booth, which was my buddy Richie. He had a ton of stuff. This box was full of empty cases. Unfortunately, I wish the discs were in there because these were some good deals. These were great deals for just the box themselves, but I figured I don't necessarily need them, so it's early in the convention, so I continued on where I looked through his booth and he had a ton of awesome stuff. And honestly, I grabbed quite a bit from him, which was pretty awesome. He ended up cutting me a deal as well. This Spider-Man game caught my eye for the Xbox 360, as well as a few other things like this Nintendo DS case, which I thought was very unique and different. And even this cool Two Worlds Collector's Edition, I ended up grabbing that. All of that from Richie ended up being $50, and we'll talk about everything. But first off, I want to mention I did pick up Kobe Bryant and NBA Courtside. I love this game as a kid, and I love this still to this day. But the crazier stuff was this stack right here. First off, a Nintendo DS case that kind of looks like a backpack. I don't know what this is about, but it's definitely cool and definitely worth grabbing for me. And then I grabbed the games. I got Metroid Other M, as well as The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and two special editions, the Gears of War 2 Limited Edition, and this Two Worlds 2-disc Collector's Edition, which just looks awesome. I've never played this game, so when I saw this, I figured I'd end up grabbing it, and he did all of this for $50, which is definitely a good deal. He gave me the homie hookup, and I'm super thankful for him, but that's not all that I found, so let's go out back hunting more and see if we can find more stuff. So I made my way back towards the back here because there weren't very many people, where I saw this booth that had a bunch of games here, which were interesting, but honestly, there was nothing on this table that I was looking for or didn't have already, so I quickly made my way to my buddy Nick's booth, where I checked his booth out, and honestly, I've been buying a bunch from him, so I didn't actually end up finding anything that I needed from him, which is like the first time ever, which is kind of unfortunate. I like to support Nick, so I will make it up to him in the future. Just make sure you check out the channel because that's coming soon. But then I continued on where I made my way to Yumi Games' booth. Link down below for a bunch of these guys that I bought from. But I ended up buying a bunch of stuff. I love buying from friends, and this is no difference. I ended up grabbing Thief for the Xbox original here, as well as I kept looking and ended up getting Activision Anthology for the PS2, and some other interesting games that you'll have to wait just a minute or two to see because I didn't get them on camera, but you will definitely see when I show you them. I checked out some more games around his booth, but that ended up being all that I ended up getting on camera. So I went to the next booth here where I kind of checked it out a little bit and was kind of seeing some cool things. I like to find like random accessories that I don't have or maybe I haven't seen in a while. And this Nintendo DS case looked cool, but honestly, I didn't end up getting it. I did see a few games on their table kind of around the bend though, and that's when I ended up finding this Wonder Swan game, which is totally awesome. This is Hunter x Hunter, and I we'll talk about that in a minute, but I kept looking here for the Wii's, as well as through the GameCube section here. And honestly, I didn't really find much that I had to have or didn't have in my collection already. And that is when I noticed he had a bunch of games kind of back off to the back there. You see me kind of leaning down to try to see it. And I ended up grabbing Kirby, Nightmare, and Dreamland here for 55 bucks because the box was so busted. I ended up paying for him, and I was really happy that I ended up picking up this stuff. These two booths ended up being really good. Unfortunately, my buddy Nick didn't have anything, but I'll take care of him in a little bit. Don't worry. Then I went over to Yumi Games where I found Thief for the Xbox for 10 bucks. Definitely a no-brainer. Activision Anthology for 7 bucks for the PS2. This is a bunch of like old Atari 2600 games, which is cool. And then you might have seen my wife grab Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer for the Wii for 5 bucks. A ridiculous Wii game we'll probably play, and I don't know if we'll enjoy it, but we'll play it. And then last but not least is, I think, one of my, I guess, complete TurboGrafx 16 games. I think I have like 1 or 2 of them, but I ended up grabbing Final Lap Twin, which is just a racing game complete here for $39. Always gotta hook it up. Always gotta support the homies. So I ended up spending some money there. And then the next booth ended up having some crazy stuff. I've got a Wonder Swan console, but I don't have any games for it because back in the day when I got it, it came with a bunch of Wonder Swan color games, and those don't work with it. So when I found one in the wild, of course I had to buy it. I think this was like 10 bucks, which was crazy. And then you guys saw me pick up Kirby, Nightmare, and Dreamland. For 65 bucks, this was an absolutely insane pickup, but I can't wait to give this a try and see how the Wonder Swan works, but so far, I'm loving this convention. So I continued on through this game convention, and I made my way to this booth where I've traded with this guy before, and so he's always really nice, and so we ended up talking a little bit. We made a trade. If you haven't seen that video, you gotta check that one out. But I kind of checked and looked through his booth a little bit, and that's when I made my way to the Nintendo 64 section. And if you didn't see that other video, I ended up buying Star Wars Episode 1 Racer from him for 10 bucks. Absolutely amazing game. If you've never played it before, you definitely need to. I kind of kept looking around through his booth a little bit more, but honestly, I didn't find anything that was that crazy, so I was about to walk away when he handed me this not for resale Adventures of Link, which was pretty awesome. But then I made my way to Arkansas Picker, and listen to what he said to me. Which one do you want me to buy?
Both.
Both? Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
I'll do it.
No, don't buy both.
Now I'm going to.
Just buy one of them.
Now I have to. And so, as you could tell, I was forced to buy 2 copies of the Serious Sam collection for the Xbox 360 from Arkansas Picker, and he charged me $40 for this. I can't believe it. I was at a game convention and he made me buy the same game twice. No, okay. It's just a joke. It's a joke. But like I said, I love supporting my homies. So when he said that, I was like, okay, I gotta screw with him and buy both. And I'm thinking maybe in the future, I might trade one back to him. But that's for a future video. But as you can see, I also ended up picking up Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, which is a ton of fun. But we gotta keep going here. Then I ended up seeing this Kirby plush and a few others here in the bin, but unfortunately nothing I had to have. And I looked around this bin a little bit more to see if maybe there was something that I needed or that maybe I was looking for. And unfortunately I didn't, but I did find these little Kirby plushes, which were tempting, but ultimately I didn't end up pulling the trigger. I kind of wish I had now. But I turned around and went straight into the Gaming Horde booth, which is always huge every time they do something. So I knew I was going to find something I had to have here. I made my way to the Wii U, the Wii section, even down to the GameCube section, and didn't really find anything till I made it to the Nintendo 64 section and ended up buying battle tanks from them. But then I ended up leaving their booth to go to Eric Murr's booth, who is actually the owner and the one who puts on the Oklahoma Gaming Frenzy. And every time I do, go to one of his events, I try to buy a bunch of stuff from him, and this was no different. First off, I wandered through this big bin of Nintendo 64 games. There was a ton here. There was a few on my list, but there was only one that I ultimately ended up getting. Yeah, you can see right there. I just found another Battle Tanks, which is an amazing game. But that's when I ended up spotting Penny Racers, and I ended up grabbing that from Eric. And then I kept going here where I saw a bunch of Game Boy games. And look at this little Pokemon game for red. But then underneath, I ended up finding the Godzilla game, which absolutely looks insane. And while I was looking, my wife also wanted to grab Hades and Harvest Moon here. So we ended up grabbing a bunch of stuff. First off, you guys saw me. I picked up Battle Tanks from the Gaming Horde. Absolutely amazing game. You're literally in tanks and you battle. Like, it's a ton of fun. You can't go wrong with playing it. And then at Eric Murray's booth, I ended up buying 4 games, 2 for myself and 2 for my wife. Like you saw, I ended up picking up Penny Racers, which looks like it could be fun. And then the game I think I'm most excited about buying from this booth was this Godzilla game for the Game Boy. I cannot wait to pop this in my Game Boy and get to playing it. And then my wife ended up finding Harvest Moon DS as well as Hades. She played the second one recently and wants to play this one, so this ended up being a good stop, but let's keep going here. And then I made my way to the Yesterplay collectibles booth, which is a local game store, and they always have a ton of awesome stuff. It's always well worth checking out when they have booths here as well. So I kind of wandered through their booth a little bit, and that's when I ended up finding Mia Hamm Soccer for the Nintendo 64 for $6. A lot of people would probably overlook this game, but I have a lot of nostalgia for this, and it is a ton of fun. And that thing is just crazy that they had it. Then I ended up finding this Kirby's Epic Yarn here for the Wii, and I looked around through this a little bit more, and that is all I ended up getting for the Wii. They had some cool little figures here and there. And then I made my way to the GameCube section, where I ended up finding this preview disc, which just looks absolutely insane. For that price, I had to grab it. And then I looked around their booth a little bit more, and I ended up spotting this Pokemon Snap for the Nintendo 64, which was totally awesome. So I ended up grabbing all the games that I was wanting to buy from them and ended up buying them, and I ended up finding some good stuff. Obviously, Mia Hamm, probably a lot of people don't care about, but I have a ton of fun with that game, and I think it's definitely worth it. Then you've got Kirby's Epic Yarn. Like, this is an amazing Kirby game. I don't have much more to say there. This preview disc caught my eye, and I was like, okay, I'm going to have to pick it up. For that price, that's a no-brainer. And then I ended up grabbing Pokemon Snap, as well as a game for my wife called Barbie in the 12 Dancing Princesses. And whenever I bought all this stuff from them, they said, hey, thank you so much for talking about our store and everything. And their owner cut me a deal. So I got a pretty good deal here, and I was very happy, and I'm definitely going to have to buy from them in the future more. So then I continued wandering through this game convention even more, and that's when I stumbled upon a copy of Kirby's Return to Dreamland. I recently played this on the Switch, and I have never played it on the Wii, so I'm probably going to have to do that pretty soon. And I ended up grabbing this while I was looking for Kirby games, which was totally awesome. And then next to it, I ended up finding a bunch of GameCube games, and I kind of looked through those a little bit to see if there was anything that I needed there, as well as I kept moving down the line where they had a bunch of little handhelds and more expensive kind of Nintendo 64 games and loose games here and there. I talked to the booth runner here, and I've seen him at a few cons, so it was nice to see him and say what's up to him as well. And then I went to this next booth where I ended up finding Excitebike 64, and while I was looking through, I realized that I actually have bought from this guy before a few times, and it was awesome to be able to yet again support people that are in the community here. And we talked a little bit, and that's when I ended up finding a Game Boy Pocket here that was blue. This is actually like the one that I had as my childhood. So we talked a little bit, and we ended up coming up with a deal, which was totally awesome here. And so far, I'm having a ton of fun. Like I said, I ended up getting Kirby's Return to Dreamland here. For this price, I gotta pick this up. And then again, every time I go to these conventions, I meet new people and we become friends and talk a bunch. So I like to support people when I see them out. So I ended up getting Excitebike, and then I ended up getting this Game Boy Pocket. I ended up getting a good deal on these as well. So I love going to these things, but there's still more we've got to find. So let's get back out there. So I made my way to this next booth where right off the bat, I ended up finding Blast Corps for the Nintendo 64. And then right next to this was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, which is an absolutely amazing game. So I ended up grabbing both of those, of course. And then I continued on here where I found some pretty crazy stuff at this booth. I wandered through the GameCube section, and then I noticed, check this out. This is a Pokemon Mini with a bunch of games down here. You can even tell by on my face, I was like, check this out. This thing is absolutely insane. And honestly, I wasn't expecting to see something like this here, but that's definitely cool to see. But I didn't have the cash to spend, so I bought my Nintendo 64 games and continued on, where I made my way to this next booth where I kind of wandered through a bunch of Nintendo 64 games, but none of these were games that I needed for my list. So obviously, since I wasn't looking for them, I didn't buy any. But I continued on where I actually ended up finding another Kirby game here for the Wii U, and that is Kirby and the Rainbow Curse. If you've got a Wii U, you've got to play this game. It is a ton of fun, and it looks absolutely insane. I kind of kept looking through the DS and the 3DS games here, but didn't end up finding anything else. This booth had a ton of fire in it. Those box consoles are crazy. Even a bunch of graded games here, which was wild to me, but nothing I wanted to spend my money on. So I made my way to this next booth where I ended up finding Kirby's Adventure for the NES here, and this was in really good condition. This booth had some crazy stuff like this box DS for Metroid on it. Kind of wandered through their booth a little bit more and even checked out this boxed Sega CD, but honestly, there was nothing else there. So I bought these two Nintendo 64 games. You saw me grab Tony Hawk's Pro Skater as well as Blast Corps. Both of these games are absolutely amazing. And then I ended up finding Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, which is an amazing Kirby game. And last but not least was Kirby's Adventure. But we still got a few more vendors to check out, so let's see what else we can find. This booth was filled to the brim of awesome stuff, but honestly, there wasn't much here that I had to buy that was in the discs section. But then I turned around and found a copy of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and I ended up grabbing this from them, which was pretty cool, but nothing else really there that I needed. So I continued on to this next booth, which had a bunch of Switch games, 3DS games, NES games here that I kind of looked through for a little bit. And then I found these cool looking stacks of Nintendo 64 games. And as you could probably tell, I was looking for some Nintendo 64 games, but there weren't any here that were on my list. So I continued on to this next booth where I ended up actually finding something that caught my eye, but I wasn't sure. Should I pick this game up in the future? I love the original Joe and Mac, but I don't know anything about the PS5 version. And then on the ground, there were $1 bins, and I found a GameCube game. It is NHL 2003, but I love hockey, so I ended up grabbing it for only $1. And last but not least, the very last vendor I ended up going to ended up having something that kind of surprised me, and I was interested to grab it. And that ended up being a PlayStation 5 game. You might know it as Concord. For 20 bucks sealed, I ended up grabbing this because I feel like it was kind of a no-brainer. It was interesting to see that this game had made it out as much. This game was skyrocketing in price, and for whatever reason, that looks like it's settled back down. So, of course, I had to grab it for my PS5 collection. Like you saw, I ended up getting Zelda Ocarina of Time. I wish this would have been like a nicer or cleaner copy, but it is what it is. And then for $1 buying a GameCube game is a no-brainer to me, and kind of a weird and wacky thing to pick up was Concord. I don't know how this is going to go in the future because this was a game that got released and then canceled, but you can't even play it now. This is some weird stuff, but for 20 bucks, I figured I had to grab it. I bought way too many games at the Oklahoma Gaming Frenzy, but I ended up having a ton of fun. I'm going to put this down before I drop it because I feel like that's probably going to happen. But every time the Oklahoma Gaming Frenzy happens, I've got to go. I've got to go and support Eric and have a ton of fun meeting all these people out in the wild, saying what's up to a bunch of homies that are vendors or just people that are there, and of course buying some awesome retro games and making some videos. So I had a ton of fun. Eric's gonna do this again at the end of the year in December in Oklahoma City, so if you're in the area, you might want to clear your schedule for that weekend. I think it's December 13th, but don't hold me to that. Check out their Facebook if you really are interested in going. But every time Eric has this, I've got to support him, so I had to show up and buy some stuff. But enough about that. I've got some games to test, some games to clean, so I got to get out of here. So check out that video out if you haven't already. But overall, I found some amazing stuff here, and I cannot wait to play a bunch of it. I feel like this Godzilla game is probably going to be the first thing that I play out of this list, but comment down below and let me know what you would play first. But I got to get out of here, so check that video out if you haven't already.